Outside the Beltway with John Fredericks. Talking to Americans outside of Washington, in the heartland, in our cities, and in our communities. About what matters to them. Outside the Beltway with John Fredericks starts now.
Professor, explain. I didn't understand what you were telling me on the phone. That's why I haven't shared it with my audience, because I didn't understand it. But I thought this thing was the Supreme Court kicked the can down the road. You said no, they ruled on one narrow thing. Explain to our audience what you tried to tell me that I couldn't grasp.
You bet. First of all, it is false that the Supreme Court green-lighted the election. It did no such thing. What happened is the original lawsuit in Tazewell was very narrow. The only party as a defendant was the Tazewell election registrar. And so that court and all courts can only limit their orders to the parties of the suit. They can't expand their orders beyond that. And the Tazewell court found two things. First of all, it found that the ballot language violated the Constitution because it was misleading, and secondly, that the Democratic Party violated the constitutional process of putting this referendum on the ballot and missing all the deadlines. So it enjoined the Tazewell clerk. Now, the Attorney General and others immediately appealed that. That was expedited to the Virginia Supreme Court. And the Virginia Supreme Court said this: Jay Jones filed a motion to stay that order. That means that the lower court's order would not go into effect. The Virginia Supreme Court denied that motion by the Attorney General in the state and allowed the order to stay in place. But it added this comment: that order is so narrow that it doesn't affect the election. So in other words, they essentially denied what the Democrats were trying to do, and they allowed this thing to continue with that order in place, but they made the observation that that order does not affect the election. So what happened after that is the Republican Party sued and congressional members sued, and Tazewell, the court, had all of the parties before it, including the Commonwealth's Board of Elections and Elections Commissioner. And the Tazewell Circuit Court enjoined them. So now the state was told it cannot forward the referendum in any fashion whatsoever. That case is now being expedited and appealed to the Supreme Court by the Attorney General and others. The Supreme Court never green-lighted the election. They just only had before it a very narrow order. So it's still possible the Supreme Court will not allow the election to proceed. And yesterday, the city of Lynchburg filed another case saying basically it's so late now in the process, it's impracticable to hold this election. And there's a hearing this morning at 9 a.m. in the Lynchburg Circuit Court asking that court to allow Lynchburg to stop election preparation because of this injunction, and asking for clarity because the state board still is asking them to proceed but not providing help, and the judge has enjoined the state board from proceeding. Does that help?
No. I really can't follow this. So
well,
are we going to have
we're
going to have the April 21st referendum or not on the redistricting, on the gerrymandering? Are we going to have it or not?
We don't know. We will know in a week. But the Supreme Court has not said that it should go forward. That was a falsehood. The Supreme Court is still going to have to make a decision on that point. And if that decision doesn't come down, if you see the Supreme Court deny a stay of the Tazewell order that is currently in place, then the election can't proceed.
Deny the stay. So the Tazewell, which the original Judge Hurley ruled against the election, and he had 4 points, and we covered that in detail. Then the Supreme Court, whatever their ruling is, I still can't understand what you're saying, green-lighted it for something, and all the lawyer friends I had said it was that there was going on, and then they got an injunction to stop it again. But like like so if there's a stay, what I don't I'm not following this. I'm really not. Sorry.
Now, I think a lot of people are confused on what a stay means. A stay is asking a higher court to stop the lower court's order. So it is the Attorney General and it is the Democratic Party that wants a stay of what Judge Hurley has ordered. The Supreme Court has denied that on the first Hurley order, but that order did not affect whether the election could go forward. Now, Judge Hurley has a much broader order that effectively prevents the election from happening. And so the state, the Commonwealth, and Jay Jones and the Democratic Party are seeking a stay to stop that order in place and say it shouldn't take effect until later, which would allow the election to proceed. The Supreme Court has not ruled on that motion. That motion, if they deny Jay Jones and the Democratic Party effectively their request to stop Judge Hurley's latest order, that means the election can't go forward. If they grant the stay, then they're allowing the election to go forward.
Okay, so when are they going to rule on that?
Anticipated within a week.
And so,
and what's happening in Lynchburg this morning, John, is that Lynchburg, in this case, has put forth the first evidence on the record that shows how the local registrars can't comply with state law because it's already too late. They have to have machines tested, and it's the state that leads that effort, and the state can't do it because of Judge Hurley's order. They have to have ballots and everything approved and sent out to outside vendors. They can't do it right now because the state is not assisting. They need monies that the state is not providing, which would require shifting of funds in Lynchburg's budget. And the city does not want to do that for a constitutionally flawed election. So now you also have on the record that it's impracticable at the local level to do this election and comply with all of the requirements to do the election on time.
So what would stop the Virginia Supreme Court from doing the same thing with the original Tazewell ruling on this gerrymandering that could cost the Republicans up to 4 seats in the House, which is likely if they pass it, where they just said, well, we're not going to make a decision until 2 days after the election? What would stop them from just doing the same thing?
They can do it, but if they deny the stay again, if they say we're not going to stay the lower court's order, then there's no way for the election to take place because that lower court order now stops the election commission as well as the election board from doing anything to forward the referendum and to have that on the ballot. So if that's the critical decision that's going to come up. If the Supreme Court denies the motion to stay the latest order by Judge Hurley, there won't be an election.
I don't know, Phil. I don't know. I because no other lawyers told me this, but you. I mean, Anderson didn't tell me this. Morrissey didn't tell me this. Peterson didn't tell me this. So you're the only guy that's saying this, the only lawyer that's saying it. Now you were Attorney General of Kansas, so you got a leg up on these guys. But I guess
what you got to do, and what I'd encourage everybody to do, is go look at the Supreme Court order in the first case, paragraph 14, and it states it very clearly what happened.
All right, so I mean on paper, we all thought, I thought the Supreme Court would have already voted this thing down 7-0, but they kicked the can down the road.
Not at all.
Why?
They didn't even do that. They didn't do anything. They refused. They refused the Commonwealth's motion to stop Judge Hurley's order. They refused it. And then they made the comment that order was so narrow, it only affected one elections clerk. And therefore, it doesn't affect the entire election. And then the RNC got the hint from the Supreme Court, and they included the state board. and the state election commissioner in the next lawsuit. So then Judge Hurley's order applied to the state as a whole, to the entire Commonwealth. And he said the election can't go forward. And now Jay Jones is trying to stop that order. And that is the first time the Supreme Court has really faced the issue of whether this election is going to take place or not. And I think the Supreme Court will have strong concerns. You've got ballot language that no one can argue is accurate and informs the voter. It is misleading and deceptive. It basically says, do you want fairness? If you do, vote for this referendum. That is absurd. And I think the court will take great offense at that ballot language. It violates the Constitution. And additionally, the court isn't living in a vacuum. They know that the Democratic Party is running ads everywhere that compound how misleading the ballot language is by talking about fairness and not talking about the fact that they're setting aside maps that were drawn by a bipartisan commission that is set up by the Constitution. I don't believe the Supreme Court will allow that to stand.
Yeah, but you can't monitor political advertising. I mean, these PACs are running these ads. It's kind of the Wild West in Virginia. I know the ads are very misleading. They're upsetting a lot of people. But one thing, okay, if I'm not convinced that the Virginia Supreme Court is just not going to kick this to the
Well, and John, let me say, it's not the ads, it's the ballot language. The ads compound the problem. The ballot language is, do you support fairness? Will you restore fairness? Vote yes. That is deceptive. That's expressly what Judge Hurley found.
But the ballot language is controlled by the elected officials that were duly elected in Virginia, the General Assembly. So now you're going to overturn. I mean,
it's not.
Well, who did the ballot language?
Controlled by the Virginia It's controlled by the Virginia Constitution, which puts parameters on the ballot language, which expressly states that
when was the last time these justices followed the Virginia's Constitution? I mean, come on, man. There's
a lot of decisions by the courts in Virginia that have struck down ballot language and confined ballot language and said it can't be value laden. The courts have done that. There's precedent for that. Judge Hurley just did it.
All right, let me get some calls here to let's extend this and ask Phill the right questions here, because this thing in Virginia is huge. I mean, it's 4 seats. If it passes, if it gets on the ballot and it passes, we're likely going to lose 4 seats, at least 3, right? Whitman is gone. Kline is gone. Kiggins actually is the only one that has a shot, and McGuire, just because of how hard he works, might be able to hang on, but it's doubtful. But we're probably going to lose all the seats, so it's a 4-seat swing that could shift power to the Democrats and Hakeem Jeffries. So this is how huge this is. So you're trying to beat at the ballot box. I want to get your calls. Ask Phill a question, because I'm still not really understanding it. 888-480-JOHN, 888-480-5646, 888-480-5646. We're going to certainly fight this here. But one thing that I have to tell you is I thought this thing would pass like 70-30. Polls aren't showing that. They've spent a lot of money. They're not moving the needle. Roanoke poll had them under 50%, leading, but under 50%. Another poll had them actually in the low 40s that came out. Saxman is telling me, Saxman is, he's not a rah-rah guy. I mean, he's going to tell you like it is. That's why that's why some people get mad at him. But Saxman's telling you like it is. He called me yesterday and he said, we need to do a bus tour. This thing can be defeated with the right messaging. Now, we also know they're going to spend $50 million if they have to put Hakeem Jeffries in there. But it's not a done deal. It's not a done deal on the ballot. It's not a done deal on the voting. But early voting starts in like a week. So then what do you do if it's not even determined? Phill.
Yeah, well, that's the very issue that Lynchburg is bringing up to the court this morning, the circuit court in Lynchburg. They're saying we can't do this with all the state requirements and all the state engagement in certifying machines and ballots and state funding, which is not being provided right now because the state is enjoined from doing so by the Hurley order. We can't proceed. This thing is lost. So there's a key hearing in Lynchburg this morning, and then there's also the key issue of whether the Virginia Supreme Court grants Jay Jones' motion to stop Hurley's order. Those are two critical components as it relates to what's happening within the judiciary. And what people need to understand, however this is going to play out, it's going to play out in the Virginia Supreme Court. That court will have the final decision. And it's important to recognize they have not made it. That previous order did not address these issues because it was too narrow. The case was too narrow. But now it's getting before the court. And they will make a decision here, I believe, in the next week. If they don't, then Judge Hurley's order is just going to continue in place. And you can't do the election without the
right,
Commonwealth
let me
Election
just ask you this. Does Hurley's order, if the Supreme Court went on a 2-month vacation, does Hurley's injunction hold statewide? Yes or no?
Yes.
Well, in order for this election to go forward, Hurley's injunction statewide has to get overturned statewide. True or false?
Or paused. That's the motion to stay, asking that it be paused. So you're correct.
What is the only judicial body that can either throw it out or pause it?
Well, the Supreme Court's going to bring it up to them. They're the ones who will make this decision ultimately.
So, okay. So the Supreme Court, if they do nothing, there's no election, right?
Can't be. Now, here's what might happen. The state board might violate Judge Hurley's order. And then Judge Hurley has to hold them in contempt.
No.
And there's some evidence that they're trying to do that now. So, but no, Judge Hurley's order stops them from any way forwarding the election.
All right, it's very complicated. And then the other thing is, did somebody sue about the language? So does the Supreme Court have to decide on the language? Because the ballots are getting printed, early voting starts in a week, and that language is there. So is there a sense of urgency whether or not this language is constitutional or not?
Yes, and Judge Hurley found it to be unconstitutional.
Well, this gives you a headache, right? Easiest thing to do is just go out and beat it. I'm very confused. Let's get to the phone lines. I think my callers might be able to shed some light on this for me because it's very confusing. It's like everybody's throwing sand in the gears, hoping that something will just knock it off the rails. Mike in Chester, Virginia, line 2. You're on with Professor Kline.
Good morning, fellas. Mr. Kline,
Good morning.
I am your biggest fan. You speak truth to power. My question to you this morning is this. How the hell do we get dark money out of these elections?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's a different problem, and that is that we tried to restrict under McCain-Feingold's campaign finance, and what happened in doing so is it pushed all of the money away from the parties and into all of these various so-called nonprofits where foreign billionaires are laundering money into elections. Honestly, what you need to do is repeal McCain-Feingold. Let the parties, which are transparent, much more transparent, and also have an ideological focus, have the money to forward the ideology of the parties. Right now, the Democratic Party is purchased by foreign money because all of that foreign money now can flow through nonprofits rather than go to the political parties. That's actually, it's campaign finance restrictions that have harmed the effort to have transparency and accountability in government.
Have the NGOs always been there?
No, The NGO effort came about because McCain-Feingold said you can't give the money to the political parties. So McCain-Feingold, it used to be the political parties had a lot of weight. That's where people gave their money. And foreign billionaire money would be easily seen within a political party and would be called out. But McCain-Feingold said, no, you can only give so much to political parties. So then all of the money started to flow to nonprofits. In fact, I've got a 2007 memo from John Podesta, who was working for Obama, to George Soros, saying this gives us a great opportunity to use nonprofits to directly affect elections. I need another $250 million, $250 million to elect Obama to run through nonprofits. And it had already received hundreds of millions through unions and others. And Soros wrote the check. So this has been going on a long time. McCain-Feingold is the problem here. It needs to be repealed. Our political parties should be able to receive funds. And certainly we need to eliminate nonprofits all across the board. Americans were charitable before we had a nonprofit deduction. And right now, most Americans don't take the deduction on their tax return because the exemption is so high. And all it is foreign billionaires using your tax dollars through claiming a deduction to engage in politics. That's where the protests are coming from. That's who's funding the protests.
I understand. So exactly the McCain-Feingold thing has allowed the foreign money to actually cherry pick where they want their funds to go as opposed to donating directly to the Democratic Party.
That's right. That's right. There's a United States Supreme Court case called Citizens United that says it's unconstitutional to limit individual. You can limit monies to campaigns and parties, but you can't limit monies to that citizens spend independently. And those two things combined have they've destroyed our national discourse. Most of the disruption you're seeing in America today is funded through nonprofits, and it's foreign monies. That combined, even the media is captured that way. And that's a lengthier explanation, but there are leftist nonprofits that really write most of the media stories for what's called the legacy media.
How much of the USAID money was actually being designated to NGOs, and who has the control of those funds?
Well, that's got to be Congress and the executive branch, and they've been fighting over that. The president, of course, has taken bold action to restrict some of the grant monies. Now, there's two sources here. Those are grant monies, and yes, our government is funding some of the effort to undermine our government through the Biden administration and their grants. But that grant money is really controlled by Congress. The president has some discretion. He tried to cut it. There have been lawsuits about it. And what needs to happen is Congress needs to ratify the president's cuts, and that makes it clean. And they're trying to do so. And John Fredericks is absolutely correct. Get rid of the filibuster and get these basic things done. We need to get it done. They use government money. They use your money through these tax deductions to fund an effort that undermines basic American values.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate your explanation.
Hey, Mike, thank you. Thanks for bailing me out here. This is a very complicated issue. And so it just to boil this down, I hope I'm going to try to paraphrase it. I'm going to try to paraphrase this, Phill, so I can maybe show some semblance of grasping this, okay? So number one, the Supreme Court of Virginia has to rule on the language of the referendum, because right now, as Hurley said, Judge Hurley, it does not meet the criteria laid out in the Virginia Constitution. So they have to rule on that. They have to rule on that within a day or so, because ballots are getting printed and early voting starts in, I think, a week. So there's very little time for this. So if they're going to rule on it, it's got to happen now. Then they have to rule on the Hurley second injunction, which basically is canceling. Is you can't have the election. They have to rule on that, either pause it or overturn it for election to go forward. If they do neither or nothing, then the state board of elections can defy Hurley and go ahead with the election anyway, unless some higher court steps in. But then Hurley can turn around and hold them in contempt, etc. All. Is that basically on the legal question of the 4 gerrymandered seats in Virginia where we are today?
Not quite. Let me give you 2 things to watch. The Supreme Court has before it a motion to stay Judge Hurley's latest order. If the Supreme Court does not grant that motion, the election can't take place. And today in Lynchburg, there is a hearing. If the circuit court judge in Lynchburg says that Lynchburg does not have to go forward with preparing the election, that makes it extraordinarily difficult for the election to take place. Those are 2 things to watch.
All right.
Either one could kill the election.
So the hearing in Lynchburg, how can that kill the election? That's just one city.
Well, if you have an entire city that's told not to have an election, then the Supreme Court will be, by necessity, have to act to overturn that order, or you have an election without a big part of the electorate.
Who would that Lynchburg order come from? Like, who would issue that order, and how did they get there? I mean,
am I still with you?
In the weeds here, Phil.
There is a lawsuit.
In the weeds, okay.
There's a lawsuit.
I got to get out because if you're in West Virginia, you're now tuning me out. We're just 2 in the weeds. This is not like a law class. All I know is right now it's on the ballot until further notice because the Supreme Court has to do something. They haven't done anything. They kicked the first one down the road. We got Lynchburg, got a bunch of different things in play. And it's very confusing. But the reason we talk about this is because it's 4 seats that could determine the seat of power in America. And if the Democrats win and take over the House, the Trump presidency ends the next day. Everybody knows it. He's not going to be able to do anything. They'll impeach him on the second hour and all that stuff. We all know what's coming if they win. So, but then you've also got the ability to defeat this at the ballot box, which all the money they spent and they've not moved the needle. So there's, if we can get our vote out, this thing can actually be competitive now. I didn't think it would be, but according to the polls, I mean, people don't like it. Democrats don't like it. So I expected the boomerang fact that happened in California. That's not happened. I mean, they've already spent $15 million, the Democrats, on promoting this all over TV and social media, and they've not moved the needle. They haven't gained anything. In fact, if anything, they went south. So something's going on here. I don't know what it is, but we're going to keep following it. Phill Kline, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Let me just get you one more comment on Mandami. How long do people in New York City put up with this? Like, what's Mandami's endgame here?
Well, Mandami's proposals would put the marginal tax rate in New York up above 57%. John, now China gets revenue from a lot of different sources, value-added tax and so forth. But in China, there's a marginal income tax rate of 45%. Think about that. Mandami's tax rate would be by far the highest in the nation. And I think I think New York starts losing its wealth. He's trying to prevent people from selling properties that they rent. He's putting new rent controls on things. I think he's going to chase New York's wealth out of the city if he gets what
and then the collapse. And then the collapse happens. Okay, I got Eric Scherer coming up next. You're on the John Fredericks Media Network. Phill Kline, people want to follow you. Where do they go?
#PhilDKline.
Thanks, Phil. We're going to be right back. Stay with us.